My name is Becky Julian, and I'm from Indian Brook. I'm 74, I'll be 75 next month. And when I was growing up, my aunt and my uncle brought me up, and they were my mother's aunts, really. She was my great aunt, and they spoke in Mi'kmaq. So my first language was Mi'kmaq. And then I was 4 years old when they put me in a residential school. They didn't put me in a residential school at first. They returned me to my mother. But me, as being a sassy kid, didn't believe that my mother was my mother. And I saw her up and down because the boys that were there that helped bring me up had a vocabulary that I don't think a priest would. Anyway, as a result, I got kicked out of church the very first time I went to church at the residential school for arguing with the priest during Mass. So one of the big girls had to stay with me outside until Mass was over each day. And I sort of was forbidden to speak Mi'kmaq when I was there. But I never got to come home every day, every year, every summer, because my aunt was still in a sanatorium. That's why I was put in there. And when my mother got married, I think in 47, 48, somewhere like that, they took me out of the residential school, and I didn't have to go back. But each summer when I came home, I learned my language because it was still in my mind. But not being able to use it from September to June, I would lose it. But then I was lucky because my mother had moved to another community, Pictou Landing, and everybody spoke Mi'kmaq there. And it didn't take me long to get it back. And I've been speaking it ever since. Even though we moved back here after my stepfather passed away in 58, my mother moved us back here because all her relatives were in Shubi. And she didn't have any relatives in Pictou Landing. So we moved back here. And already there were a lot of people that were speaking the language, but they were starting to lose it because they had the nuns up here teaching that didn't allow it in school. So, and as a result of the TV coming into the picture, before that Native people didn't have it, they just had the radio. And then everything was in English. And that had a lot to do with our language, not just the residential schools. Everywhere she looked was English, everything was in English. Apsigilane gan sugis kisa halimnig. Mauyam ko sa wea alnui sudim na migmawi. Migmawi sibim sa duwan. Klabisin sugis kasnukat na elkimot sanatorium. Na tuju newi bunayap. Na newi bunaya ni Pisqualim Residential School elkimim. Da mektem up mon kich. O eulim ka winim ka ko edelim monagilan kich. Klabis bewadu residential school. Na de leimane na me na still buski wina bugoy ha. Nega onnu isi. Na ha esaligwaim kalsutuokong. Amis naduen maliami te kuisimu kuega kahaya halame sege. Tujua nutsinena nepkek tan tujuna ha apajikusi kijiladet Sipekne'katik. Seduan ogo ma emu livni a hujigimaji. Mo emu ko buana la Pictou Landing dan agongkut. Na ha kis watching do di majuinu ka klisi di emu. Pukak kis wana klasi visit. Ahamsut ko dana kaptemen, astiksedemen, daglas evitu. Se muuda buakkono ko wenjuitu. Ada biam imset ko da hoi wajadum da mielien. Na basaglas evinudemen. Aha edelgina masulti jiglagi sa hoyak mi juajis. Muigina muamma tuenan nuisin deli pitchademanas. Ais gina muokonku. Naha negmo wajien duega lucidiminen. Kad bemi abajasi kiskuk pemaduega kinamu okon tateliel nuisin. Ahaigenod mahachik mijuadisk. Kad me still mijuadi jimanim pa when on nuisit kigua. Na luoda ungigo mo nuisut libe. Suguis ka hono klamoksis mo nuisut. Kado pidu hukumijua ahlago grandparents na negamokol nuisut. Na luanes neukol generation bemiala danen tuudis liisudimu.
I don't remember forgetting my language when I was in residential school. I was there for 3 years, and then my mother came to get me, and we moved to we went to Maine. But I don't remember using the language, even if it was it was in Mi'kmaq or English. My parents were fluent in Mi'kmaq, so maybe at home I heard it, but I don't remember speaking it as much. But that's you don't think about those things when you're a kid. And then after my mother died, I moved to New Brunswick, and I stayed there. And I was 12 at the time. And it was, in Mi'kmaq I was more fluent then. Like I stayed there, I think, a year, maybe 2. And then it was back to Maine again.
So did you speak the language in Maine with the other
Other people,
other people up there?
You know, if I met up with somebody that I knew that knew the language, I would speak to them in Mi'kmaq. But when you have to, you know your English. I knew my English good because where we lived, we didn't live on the reserve when I was growing up. Just for a little while.
Was there a lot of other families, Mi'kmaq families around you at that time, or?
No, not really, because my father used to work in woods. Maybe he would have a couple of other workers with him. I don't know how old I was, but he used to have his brothers too working with him. So they probably spoke Mi'kmaq. Mumikui dad mua and dunan kloswanam Mi'kmaq way. Down the pitchy school we I residential school. Mo mikui dad mo all the ways in. It's not last year ways in. Bemikui anak. Era muai muti wakap all the way kadi sega muti yakap. Nega no chalo keba ni book to kis nada me. Namua ei vasta niin kisa sometime noin when vedluko vadel nutsul idua negam. Mo nut kuin danjo mom ideet muudan kluswaana. Mo dandelisin sige. Mikä mä oikeastaan alies alas ewe. Että valin sen vapan kitk. Kada mo mikviteet mo. Mo mikviteet mo. Was quick again. On the way see up then. Kada what. Danjo vapas justi ja ne. Is not a mieli justi. On the walk kisi kajane na. On the way see about valin sen vapan. Maine kisko valin sen oma. Aisi kekin aamui. On my case. Which was is kekin aamai. On the way suhtino.
I lived in Indian Brook all my life. And when I first came here, I came from Pictolanding. My grandmother came and got me when I was a baby. And her second marriage was to John Maloney, and he was from here. So we moved here. And my first language was Mi'kmaq. I didn't know how to speak English. But I learned as I played with other kids. They spoke English. And at that time, well, in my time, that's when Centralization began. And we had Indian agents, and we had the nuns, and we had the priest. And people didn't want their children to speak Negro because they were made to feel as if they were ashamed of it. And so a lot of people didn't teach their children the Mi'kmaq language because they thought that the other children at school would make fun of them. But during Centralization, I found that a lot of people that were moved here from other reserves spoke Mi'kmaq, and I really enjoyed that. I spoke Mi'kmaq with them. But as I went to school, I learned to speak English. And that's the reason why today hardly anybody speaks Mi'kmaq. And of course the residential school, that was happening too at the time. And you weren't allowed to speak one word in Mi'kmaq at the residential school. But I find now people will say something, try to say something in Mi'kmaq, and they'll make it into like a shortcut, like when the nuns came. They were in Mi'kmaq, you called him Aniapsuinusk. And then the kids couldn't actually say Aniapsuinusk, so they'd say Aniap. And it's short, it was like a little slang. And to speak proper Mi'kmaq, it seems like you have to speak to somebody from another reserve that hung on to their language, like Eskasoni and New Brunswick. So I try to teach. My children will understand it. Sometimes they can say a few sentences. And I try to teach my grandchildren how to speak Mi'kmaq. I will talk to them in Mi'kmaq. In fact, I help to teach Mi'kmaq at the school now. Teach them names of animals, places. Chris Pegis Nanik, let it parce que no isi ap mada aglas isi wa kadu ba which pada ni ga which wa jistet parce que aglas isi tibni naglagi na bet keno do masi dan dari aglas isi centralization iga metro new which bidabni which bidabni pick to ga pattern cake anh em bảo con nó biết số thì mình na dia vậy which is here we on the see up a glass here we see up ula det centralization which was just coming we so the dish and me dia a ula det is a modem ni a glass here we so the ga me mo ka me dia na now chet kids go ga ada on we see a glass here we see